Hey guys, I'm Brianna. Welcome back to my channel. Alright, so I'm here to do the mid-year Freakout tag that goes around booktube this time every year. This will actually be my first year doing it. My booktube channel is only about a year old, so last year I just didn't feel like I had gotten into the booktube community quite far enough yet to try it for myself, but I really enjoy watching all of the other booktubers mid-year Freakout tags. But I'm excited to do it for myself this year. Alright, before we get into the update of what I've read so far this year, go ahead and hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you will be notified when I upload other videos like this. Alright, so far this year I have read 22 books, which is really good for me, considering I think I only read 30 books altogether last year, so about halfway through, about 22. I'm pretty happy with that. My goal on Goodreads for this year was 35 books, so I think we're gonna make it. I'm not 100% sure. It could slow down, but I think we're gonna make it. So I've got my Goodreads pulled up, and I'm gonna be taking a look at the books that I've read so far as we go through and answer these mid-year Freakout questions. The first question is the best book you've read so far in 2021, and for me, that question is going to have to be answered with the next question, which is the best sequel you've read so far in 2021. And I'll be honest, there's only one sequel that I've read so far this year. I have been in kind of a mood where I've been bouncing around from series to series because I've wanted to try out a bunch of different series that everybody's talking about. And I haven't really gotten past the first book of any series because once I've read one, it's kind of like I want to take a break and try something else for a little while before I come back to that series. So that's just kind of how my mood reading has been this year. But the only sequel that I have read so far is A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas. And that is also going to be my best book that I've read so far of 2021. I know, super cliche. Everybody talked about it. It was full of hype. For some people, it was a letdown, but for me, it was definitely not. It is the best book of the series for me. I absolutely loved it. Being someone who's fairly new to the ACOTAR fandom, I only started them about 1.5 years ago. I love them. I fell in love with them very quickly. I just absolutely adored A Court of Silver Flames. I wasn't really sure what to expect because I was a little bit of a Nesta hater before this book and totally on Feyre's side. But after reading this book from Nesta's perspective, I realized I'm a little bit like her. And I love that she is a morally great character. I love that it shows transformation in her from the beginning to the end. And who doesn't love Cassian? I mean, some people out there might, but he's my favorite. He's been my favorite since the very beginning of the 3 Illyrian guys. So, I mean, I can't really say much wrong with that book. I was literally hooked on every single page. There were so many times in the book that my husband would look at me like smiling, like, why are you smiling reading a book? And it's just like, it wasn't because of anything specific happening in the book. It's just because I love the book so much. So that's definitely going to have to be my best book of 2021 so far. And it will also have to be the best sequel that I've read so far of 2021 because it's the only sequel that I have read. All right, moving on to question 3. A new release you haven't read yet but want to. So that's actually a lot. I've been skipping around a lot on the books that I'm reading. But I think the new release that I haven't read yet, but I want to read the most is going to be Seasons of Chaos by El Cosamano. Last year, when I just started my booktube channel and I was still a baby booktuber, I got Seasons of a Storm in a Beacon book box, and I read it immediately because it looked so good and I absolutely loved it. I actually did a review of that book, or a reading update. I think I was in the middle of the book when I did that video that I will link up here if you'd like to take a look at it. But Seasons of Chaos is the sequel to that book, and it actually just came out at the beginning of June. I have not got my hands on a copy of that yet, but I cannot wait to. I think it will be wonderful, and I'm excited to see the continuation of that story and those characters. All right, question number 4 is most anticipated release for the second half of the year. So I actually had to do some digging on this one because most of my anticipated releases for this year have actually already come out. But I actually found one while I was doing some research, and I am so excited about this one, guys. I didn't even know it was coming out. I didn't even know it was a thought. So Sharon Draper is a middle grade novelist. She may have written in other genres or categories as well, but I know her best from the book Out of My Mind, which is a book that I have in my school library that I read with my fourth graders going into 5th grade last year. I loved it. The kids loved it. They really got into the story. I absolutely loved it, and I'm excited that she is going to be releasing a sequel to that one called Out of My Heart. So it will continue Melody's story. If you don't know anything about Out of My Mind, it's about a girl named Melody who has cerebral palsy, and she is incredibly intelligent, but she cannot walk and she cannot talk, and it is from her perspective. So we get to kind of develop some empathy toward her and toward others who have disabilities that may be hard for us to understand. And I'm excited for Out of My Heart by Sharon Draper, which is supposed to be released on November 9th of this year. I will definitely have to get a copy of that one for the school library and tell all of those 5th graders that are now 6th graders that we have it so they can come check it out. But it's going to continue Melody's story a year later, and it has something to do with horses, if I read the blurb correctly. So it sounds like she's afraid of horses, but she loves them, and maybe that's going to be kind of a therapy for her, but I'm not completely sure how that's all going to work out. So I'll definitely have to read that, and it's going to be a good one. That's my most anticipated release for the second half of 2021. Question number 5 is biggest disappointment. This one's kind of a hard one for me because I actually have read a lot of really great books this year, and it's just been a really good reading year for me. Looking back on all the books that I've read some really great books. Some books that I can definitely recommend to other people. So my biggest disappointment is going to be, let me look at them. Alright, so this one is probably going to be an unpopular opinion, but my biggest disappointment of 2021 is going to be 6 of Crows. So I actually had already read, I know I'm reading them in a terrible order, and that could totally be why it was a disappointment. I read Shadow and Bone, and then I jumped and I read 6 of Crows, and I plan on eventually going back and reading Siege and Storm, which is the second book in the Shadow and Bone trilogy. But I felt like since I had already read Shadow and Bone, I needed to jump and read 6 of Crows before the show came out because I wanted to kind of know what was going to happen when they combined those two storylines. And I was a little let down by 6 of Crows, I'm not going to lie. It took me a while to get through. It seemed to drag quite a bit. I love the characters. I absolutely love the characters. But as far as the action and the plot, it just seemed to drag for me. And then I was super disappointed to find out that they changed a huge part of the plot in the show. So just in order to be able to combine those plots, and I know a lot of people say that they did a really good job of this and that they really enjoyed this, and I didn't. I'm going to be honest, I did not enjoy that change at all. But if you've read 6 of Crows, then you know that the crows kind of have this mission, and they've got to get into a very difficult place to get into and kind of kidnap somebody. I'm not going to give too much away, but the person that they kidnap in the book is not Alina, which is who they kidnap in the show. And I was very unhappy about that. I feel like those 2 series would have been amazing standalone TV series. They could have had their own. They could have had 2. So yeah, I wasn't thrilled about that. That could also be another reason why I feel like that's my biggest disappointment. But I just feel like there's so much hype around 6 of Crows. Everybody talks about how much they love it and how good it was. And it was a disappointment to me. It just was. Question number 6 is biggest surprise. I actually have several for this one. I've been surprised by a lot of books. Alright, I'm going to have to, I know this is really not narrowing it down, but I have 3 that really surprised me. So I kind of got into reading graphic novels this year because they become so popular at my school library. So I challenged myself to read more graphic novels, and I have been surprised by a lot of them. But the one that I've been surprised about the most is called Cardboard. And this story, on surface level for like elementary kiddos, which are who I serve in my library, like they love it because of the idea of creating something out of cardboard and it coming to life, which is basically the premise of the graphic novel. But there are so many deeper issues that are presented in this book, like family dynamics, and the main character, his mom had passed away, and so he's kind of dealing with that, but then his dad is also like raising him by himself, and then he's afraid to kind of move on, even though there's this woman who's a neighbor who has shown interest in his dad. So there's just a lot of heavier issues presented in the book, and I just thought it was really good. It was handled really well. I loved how the ending kind of came together, and I just think it's a really great graphic novel, especially for younger readers to read that may be going through issues like that. But it would also be good to have a content warning if you are somebody recommending that to a younger kiddo. So that one really surprised me. Also, We Were Liars was a good surprise for me. I listened to that as an audiobook, and I went into it from a recommendation from one of my master's level class instructors, and I was really happy that I read that one. I love books that are twisty and make you think one thing and then you find out something completely different at the end, and this one did that. So I definitely recommend reading that book if you are in for surprises. Like, it was a big surprise. Third one that was a big surprise for me this year is Starfish by Lisa Phipps. So I got this book as an ARC, and it is written in verse, which I really don't read a lot of, even though I really enjoy books written in verse. I don't read a lot of them, but this one really hooked me. I felt emotionally attached to the character for many different reasons. I'm excited to have this book in my school library this year for other kiddos to read, to see what they think, but even as an adult, I really enjoyed this book. It will definitely go down as one of my favorites from this year, but I was definitely surprised by the emotional impact that I had from that book. Question number 7 is favorite new author. I'm going to have to look at my list here because I read a lot of new authors. I think my favorite new author so far this year is going to be Marissa Meyer, who is the author of the Lunar Chronicles series. I started that series. I've read Cinder. I've actually started Scarlet as an audiobook, and so far I love it as well. But I read Cinder as an audiobook, and I'm reading Scarlet as an audiobook that I checked out from the public library. And I've heard several good things about them. I've heard other booktubers talk about that series, but I loved it. I didn't expect to love it as much as I did, and I loved it, and I think her writing style is right up my alley. So I will say she is definitely my favorite new to me author for this year. But there's an honorable mention, and that's going to be for Adeline Grace. I read All the Stars and Teeth like very early this year, and I really loved that book too. I have the sequel that was released this year, but I haven't read it yet. But I think she has a really good writing style as well, and I'm excited to see what else she comes out with. All right, question number 8 is my newest fictional crush. So I can't say that Cassian is my newest fictional crush because he was my favorite even last year when I was reading the ACOTAR series. So for question 8, my newest fictional crush for this year, that's kind of a hard one for me. Looking back at my list. Okay, so even though Six of Crows was a little bit of a letdown for me, my newest fictional crush definitely comes from that book, and that's going to be Mr. Kasbrecher. Just going to leave that one there. All right, the next question is a book that made me cry, and that one is a very easy one to pick out. So the book that made me cry probably the most is going to be When Stars Are Scattered by Omar Muhammad and Victoria Jameson. That is a graphic novel, and I cried in several different parts of that book, but I absolutely loved it. I also did another video where I talk about this book and how it made me cry. I will link that up above so that you can check that out as well. It is a graphic novel about 2 brothers who are refugees in Africa, and it's kind of about their life and what they have to go through, and also their hopes of being able to come to America. So I definitely cried on several different places of that book. It was tugged at my heart. It was just so good. And then the next question is a book that made me happy. Besides A Quarter Silver Flames, which made me happy for many different reasons in many different places of that story, I'm going to say that Magnus Chase and the Gods of Asgard made me happy because I'm a huge fan of Norse mythology, and I just really enjoyed that story. It was funny. The character was witty. I had never read a Rick Riordan book before, so I've never read Percy Jackson. I know other people say that these books are very It's like the exact same character but with a different name, like very similar sarcasm and personality as Percy Jackson. But I've never read it before. But I really enjoyed it. I love the Norse mythology. I love how he tied it all together in this more modern story. So I'm going to say Magnus Chasing the Gods of Asgard, book 1, is what made me happy. The next question is the most beautiful book you've bought so far this year or received. That's a hard one. I've received several beautiful books, and I've got one on the way that I'm really excited about. Okay, without actually going to my bookshelf and looking, I'm going to say a few, because I've gotten some really beautiful books this year. So I'm going to say Lore by Alexandra Bracken is one of the books that I've gotten this year that I just think is absolutely gorgeous. Also, I would say Bone Crier's Moon. I really like the look of that cover. That's a really good one that I've gotten. And my last one I'm going to say is going to be Playing Cupid, because I got it from a special edition box by Beacon Book Box, and so it's an exclusive cover, and it has like shiny red sprayed edges. So I'm going to say those are my 3 most beautiful books that I've gotten this year so far. What books do you need to read by the end of the year? A lot. Well, I just recorded a review of Storm of Swords, which I just finished, and then I drew out my next 3 reads from the TBR jar. So those will definitely be top 3. I would also like to read Fire with Fire, which is another book that I've received from Beacon this year. What else? Oh, I would love to finish the Shadow and Bone trilogy and also go ahead and read Crooked Kingdom. And then I would also like to read King of Scars and Rule of Wolves, because I have those books coming in a special edition Beacon Book Box. And I don't want to read those until I have the other books read. There's so many others though, but we'll get to what we can get to. And the last one is, and I don't know if this is a question on everybody's, but it's on the list that I have. So my last question is going to be favorite book to movie adaptation you've seen this year. And that one hands down is going to be Flora and Ulysses, which was on Disney+. I read that book last fall as part of an assignment for my Master's of Library Science degree for one of my classes, and I loved the book. Didn't even know it was becoming a movie, but I watched the movie with my kiddos over the summer, toward the beginning of the summer, and I loved it. I think they did such a great job adapting that book into a movie. It was super cute, super sweet, and I just loved it. So that'll be my favorite book to movie adaptation that I've seen this year. All right, I think that covers my mid-year freak out. I'd love to hear your thoughts on these books in the comments below, or if you have any book recommendations for me based on some of the things that I've said. You probably have an idea of the books I enjoy reading, and I'd love to hear your recommendations. Maybe those will get bumped up on my TBR as well. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you next time. Bye!